just found it. So we're recording. Yay. Alrighty, guys. So I think that's everybody that's come. Oh, there we go. Another person. So, welcome to Coffee and Quality. So glad everybody's here. Hope everybody had a nice, safe, healthy summer. There's a lot going on, probably a lot going on within your agency, kind of as everybody's navigating COVID-19 and kind of going back to, some kind of establishing new normal during all of this time. So thank you for, sharing your morning with us today. So we're excited to be here. So just some ground rules, as we always do in Coffee and Quality. Participate, share your knowledge, share your experience, because this is a safe place to share and learn and grow. And then because we are in like this virtual space, it might be quiet, so we might call on you. This is an invitation, not an obligation to share. So if you prefer not to share, just, a gentle, I'll pass for this, or I don't have anything at this moment, but really want to help people kind of engage in this virtual platform. So before we get too far, I do want to do a couple of announcements at the beginning, and one of them is kind of exciting. So we are wanting to expand and really deepen some of the work we're doing in our quality space, so especially around coffee and quality. So what we've designed is we've designed a community of practice to improve professional competencies by engaging in shared inquiry and learning. So all that sounds a lot of fun, I know. I'm really excited about it. So it's going to be focused on, some element of data evaluation and CQI. So it'll be comprised of 6 to 10 people, and the learning cohort will then have a capstone project. So our first learning cohort will be focused on storytelling with data through data visualization. Very excited about this. Data visualization's all over the place. Everybody's always asking more about storytelling with data. So we're kind of putting all of that combined of how do you, share data, communicate a message. And that's what this learning cohort is really going to go deep dive into this topic. So the objectives for the learning cohort will be to examine trends and best practices in data viz, explore case studies, apply and practice. There'll be guest speakers, outside people coming in to talk about their lessons learned through data visualization and storytelling with data. And then the group will create a capstone project of, how do you effectively storytell with data in a nonprofit setting. So they'll be sharing that out to Coffee and Quality in January. So Coffee and Quality, the learning cohort, the time commitment is that we're going to have 10 sessions. So it'll be a commitment of October, November, December, and then one session in January where we, present that capstone project. And it'll all be over virtual Zoom or in Teams. But you see it's in the morning, so kind of still this early morning time when this cohort will meet. So I know that's very high level. I will be emailing out more of an overview in the application. So it's really easy application, only 5 questions, kind of knowing like what's your interest in data visualization and being able to storytell with data. So that's that's what the application's around. So it is kind of a small cohort of group, really trying to go deep on this topic. So it'll be 6 to 10 people. The application's being released today. Its due date is August 27th. And then we'll have decisions out by September 3rd. So all of this will come out in an email, and I'll also post on Microsoft Teams later today, so that way you can have access to that and see, read more about it and see if this is something you're interested in. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. Or drop questions in the chat right now too, it's fine. So with that, my friendly plug for Microsoft Teams. So we do have Coffee and Quality on Teams. If you're not already on the channel, please send me an email and I'll add you into the channel. But that's where I'll be sharing the overview and application for their learning cohort. And then also any of the materials from today, the PowerPoint and the recording we'll put on Teams as well. All righty, so that is my slides. So really excited to kind of shift into our content today. So, I often hear like, let's survey, fill in the blank. Do we want to survey stakeholders, our staff, our clients, but it really, there's a lot of time has to be invested into creating a quality survey, which is why I'm really excited to have our presenters here today to join and to share their expertise with us. So we have Jay and Katie from Kinder Institute, who are going to, really take us through survey design, the theory and best practices. So please give a round of applause and share some love in the chat for Jay and Katie. I'm gonna stop sharing screen so Jay can share his screen.
Thank you, Jessica. So can everyone see the PowerPoint slides? Yes?
Slides.
Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jay Wu. Thank you for joining us today. So as part of the COVID-19 response efforts, several government agencies and many organizations are collecting information through surveys for various reasons and purposes. So in the survey research community, there are a lot of discussions about the data quality and the sampling issues. As a member of the American Association for Public Opinion Research and also a survey researcher at the Kinder Institute, I've been working with Dr. Feinberg for the Kinder Houston Area Survey in the past 10 years. I'm happy to introduce some basic theories in survey design and also share some experiences with you. So first, let me ask you a question. In the past week, how many virtual meetings have you participated in? So you must be wondering why I asked this question. Just take a minute and think of, read this question and think about how you to answer this one. So the reason I want to ask you this question is not to get an answer from you directly, but rather I want to explain the cognitive process. When you ask a question, what do respondents do to answer it? So first, they take time to comprehend the question, to understand what you are asking for. And then second, they'll retrieve information from memory. And the third step, they summarize the information. And then the last step, they report an answer. So any failure in any of those 4 steps may lead to inaccurate or unreliable information. And also for us, when you collect quantitative data, that means inaccurate or unreliable data. So before the survey design, you might want to ask yourself 4 basic questions. And I put here as a checklist. The first question is, what is the purpose of the survey? And what is your main research question? And what are the topics you're going to cover? The second one is a survey the best way to collect the information that you need? Because there's a cost in collecting information through survey. Either it's a time cost or it's a direct cost. Maybe there's different ways to collect information rather than administering a survey. And the third one is the most important one, which many users or designers forget to think about it before designing a survey. So what do you plan to do with the survey data? It helps you to understand, what kind of a question you want to ask, what type of question you want to ask, what type of survey response you want to design. So, and a data analysis plan, we call it, it can provide structure and also help to avoid the data collection issues. And also every question you put it on a questionnaire must have a purpose. And also every question should produce the best possible data for that purpose. The last question you want to ask yourself is that, who is your target population? It is very important to understand your target population. Sometimes you might want to do a very small focus group before conducting a large-scale survey. As I said, because it costs time and money to administer a large-scale survey. well, usually it happens when you get the data and you realize, oh, I should have asked this question in a different way. So doing a small scale focus group before a large scale survey may help you to tweak those questions. And also you want to ask, are there any particular subgroups you want to reach? Understanding them and also showing the respect is very important. The other thing is that you want to understand what's the best way to motivate your respondents to participate in the survey and also give you the best information they can. That way, it can help you to come up with a strategy to recruit the participants for the survey and figure out what's the best communication plan with your potential survey respondents. So here is an example. As a parent, I'm a parent of a 6-year-old, and you might have completed a parent survey recently administered by your school district. So a COVID-19 response parent survey, what is the research question and what is the purpose? Most the school districts want to collect information through the survey to inform their decision making about the next fiscal year, academic year. Is the survey the best way to collect information? Yes, especially now a lot of the students are not at school, and you want to reach the parents in the most extensive way, and also include most of, if possible, all parents, but most likely those who respond to the survey. And what do you plan to do with the survey data? I mean, the school district, once they get the information, they report back to the parent population. And who is your target population? It's all parents, especially, there's particular subgroups because their circumstances might be different. Those are the parents of the children who are enrolled in special programs. So maybe they will consider asking specific questions for that group. And how to motivate your respondents to participate with the best information. I would say, parents inherently, they want to provide information feedback, especially they know that you are going to gather information to help their decision making about next academic year. And also, they will send out several reminders. This is to help them to reduce the coverage bias. They want to include as many parents as they can. Okay, so as a questionnaire designer, let's go through those questions. In the past week, how many virtual meetings have you participated in? So why do I ask this question? For today, it's really because I want to better understand who the participants are for today's meeting, especially during COVID-19. We've been through a lot of Zoom meetings, right? But maybe there's another purpose. If I'm a researcher for mental health, so this might be a way to understand the burden of virtual meetings on a weekly basis to better understand your respondents. And what are you trying to measure? So I'm trying to measure the frequency of Zoom meeting participation, right? So that helps you to design the response category or response options. The next question, is this the best way to measure? I would say there are different ways to measure the burden of virtual meetings, but this is one of the ways to quantify it. And also the answer that you collect, it's in a format that's easier for data analysis later on. Also, here's a set of questions This question is considered as a request for some piece of information that our respondent think we want them to provide. So if you were a respondent, what are the possible interpretation of this question? So you must be wondering, why you need this information. And then you're retrieving the information to think about most likely last week on my Google Calendar, like how many Zoom meetings I have scheduled and participated. And is there a socially desirable answer to that? Most likely for a question like this, you will review the true information, right? And what is the context of the question? So that one, if you put this question in a questionnaire, you will better understand the order of this question, all those questions, and why I asked this. So let's think about all the questions when you design it for a specific survey. Again, we'll go through the cognitive process. You want to design questions that are easy for your respondent to understand, and also easy to provide an accurate and reliable answers. Each question is different, especially retrieving information from your memory. It takes time, and different questions, it takes a different duration of time. So questions that can be asked and answered quickly, respondents tend to answer them. And for some questions with a larger burden, for example, open-ended question, you don't know exactly what level of information you want to share with the survey designer, so with the person who requested information. As you see, most likely for open-ended question, you will provide very brief answers without so much context. So the best way to do it is less burden on the respondent, so you can get more accurate information, but also provide a context so the respondent understand why you asked this question, what type of information you may need. And also it is important to do pre-test with friends or colleagues or non-experts or a small sample of respondents. Just test the question to see how they comprehend, and also understand the level of literacy of your respondents. So for example, if you're doing a survey with elementary school students, so the level of literacy varies across all grades. Sometimes they need some help to interpret the question and probe. So not like a self-administered survey for elementary school students might not be a good idea, especially for like a kindergarteners or first grade, right? Sometimes like in-person interviews is necessary, just to interpret the data, interpret the questions for your respondent. So let's go review two questions together. The first question, was your home damaged at all as a result of the hurricane? So let's read it again. Was your home damaged at all as a result of the hurricane? How to improve the question to avoid misinterpretation. So first, let's look at this question. Without any context, respondent would not know which hurricane you're talking about. So this is the question that we designed after Hurricane Harvey. So it will be better to write out as a result of Hurricane Harvey. And also let's look at the word home, okay? the home has a special meaning for some of us, right? So sometimes we're referring to the residence, and the home and the residence is a little bit different. So to improve this question, what we did is to add another phrase after home. We say, was your home or the place where you were living damaged at all as a result of a Hurricane Harvey? It's just to avoid misinterpretation. If we have, enough time to write out like this, a long sentence. Let's look at the second question. Was that a minor damage or major damage? Is it clear to the respondent what minor damage or major damage means? I would say for different people, they may interpret this differently. There's no clear definition what a minor damage or major damage means. So for some folks, like a roof damage with some leak, it could be a minor damage. But for some folks, they think it's really a big, major damage. So how can we improve this question to avoid a misinterpretation? What we did actually is to just describe, quantify minor damage and the major damage, what that means. So we improve the sentence and make it like the wording like this. Was that minor damage that could be repaired within a month? Major damage requiring more than a month to repair? Or was your home destroyed? So it's very clear to the respondents that there are 3 types of damage, 3 levels of damage. And then they would understand, okay, so for a roof leak, for a leak in the roof, it may can be repaired within a month. So it's a minor damage, depending on how bad it was. So here's an exercise for all the participants to think about. Can you come up with 3 questions that you could ask an individual to determine whether or not he or she will vote in November? Okay, so just to take maybe 5 minutes to write down those 3 questions. So you want to make those 3 questions to ask for different things. Any information you could gather from this individual that can help you to understand or determine whether he or she will vote in November, how likely they will vote in November election.
Hey Jay, while they're writing their questions, you have a dialog box kind of open in your bottom right corner. I'm not sure if you see that on your side. So maybe if you stop share and then you'll see it on your home screen. Yeah, I think it was like a little Windows Microsoft kind of box.
Oh, that one.
There we go. You're on such a good flow. I hated to interrupt, and I put it in the chat to you, and I was like, I don't think she's seeing this. So while we've got a moment.
Yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah, because I have a secondary monitor. So looking at the secondary monitor. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
So let me share my screen.
Great, thank you. That box is gone.
Okay, good. So we'll give 1 more minute because we'll have a breakout session that you can discuss with other participants today, and think through how to improve the wording, as well as how to design the response options for those 3 questions. Okay. So let's think about response options or answers to that question. Again, you want to ask yourself how difficult it is to provide an answer to the cognitive steps. Just to remind everyone, you want to understand the question and its content, and then search in your memory for the information, and then integrate the information, and then make decisions about knowledge or attitudes, and summarize it in a way and translate it into an acceptable response or answer based on the available response options. So you may come up with an answer, but when you review the response options, that's not one of those. You want to figure out which one should I select if it's a multiple option questions. If it's a rating questions, we call it Likert scale questions. It's very likely, but between 1 and a 7, which number I'm going to choose? That's the last step when you report the answer. You're trying to figure out how to fit in those available response options. Okay, so understand your respondents is very important. Their ability to provide accurate and reliable answers. Are they familiar with this topic? If you ask the general public about climate change, they may only have a limited knowledge about climate change. But when the respondent is let's say a scientist, they may probably, have a lot of information to share with you. So you try to avoid those jargons and use a plain language to communicate with your respondent, either through the phone, if it's a phone survey, or on the internet when you don't have the chance to probe or interpret on the phone, or like a mail-in survey. Yeah, you don't have the opportunity to interact with the respondent directly. So you try to avoid those for different formats. You try your best to provide answers easy to understand. And then the last one, do your respondents have motivation to provide an answer? Sometimes if the survey runs too long, the respondents, their attention span is just much. And maybe there are things that's happening that distract them. That's the time when you try to, I just want to give you an answer. I don't want to go through all the cognitive steps to provide the most accurate and reliable answer to this. And try to avoid those circumstances. And also motivation is very important. Like when the school district communicated with the parents, they will explain the purpose of the survey and how important it is, because they rely on the information gathered through the survey to make decisions. So the belief about the importance of the survey is very very important. For example, like a COVID-19 registry survey, and also those community needs survey that are administered by the Long-Term Recovery Committee. When the respondent understand how you are going to use the information, what's the purpose of gathering those information? they will, you know, self-motivated to provide, to respond to those surveys and try to provide as much accurate information as they can. So let's look at the response options or answers. Order of the response options is also critical. You know, people tend to select the first reasonable response. Generally avoid don't know or no option response options, you know, unless respondents feel uncomfortable, or they will say, I refuse to answer. So for example, when we do the Kinder Houston area survey, when we are on the phone, we only read through the response options that we expect the respondent to answer. We never provide a don't know category, although the respondent could say, well, I don't know. It happens when we ask some questions that's very, I would not say controversial, but it's very, people don't want to reveal their true attitude towards something, especially when they think that there's a social desirable answer, but they still don't want to answer those questions. Sometimes it's an abortion question. Sometimes it's about religious belief. Sometimes it's about their attitude toward the gay rights. They will say, well, I don't know. There's another question people will say, I don't know. That's the question that we asked, what's the biggest problem in Houston? People will sort of like think, there's so many issues. I don't know which one to pick. Biggest problem. What does biggest problem mean? So it's very likely they will say, I don't know. But most likely, they would go through their memory and provide the first reasonable response. Think about it. If I call you right after 6 p.m., when you just got back from work, what's the first thing on your mind? The traffic is so bad. So people tend to answer the first thing going through their mind. The biggest problem is traffic, correct? But now, let's say, if I call you after 6 p.m., since most of you work remotely from home, would you say traffic is the biggest problem? Most likely no. You know, so the context and the circumstances is very important. Respondents might change their answer. You need to have, you know, understand when to contact your respondent. You know, if you were a respondent, how would you answer this question? Okay. Okay, sorry, I'll go back. When I say order of response options is very important, let's say this survey will take about 15 to 20 minutes. And your attention span is about this. And respondents most likely will pay more attention toward the beginning of the survey. So you want to ask questions with more burden on the respondent, move it toward the front, especially when you ask specific questions. Because, you know, this cognitive process, it takes time, you know, and it's just a psychology, you know, so when I ask a very specific question, what did you cook for meal last night? Okay, very specific question, rather than I ask you a general question about demographics. Are you white or black or Asian? It doesn't take you a second to answer this question, right? Rather than think about, what did I cook last night? There are so many things going on. To be honest, I don't remember what I ate last night. So move those specific questions toward the beginning of the questionnaire, okay? And I mean, typically we ask demographic questions toward the end of the survey, okay? But there are different ways to ask demographic information. I'll explain later. So let's look at the question types and the response options. First, close-ended questions. Okay, close-ended questions. First one is yes/no question. Agree/disagree question. Like, are you for or against this statement or this policy? So those questions are very easy to answer. Only 2 response categories, and so it's low burden. But it also, you know, when you have a data analysis plan, we usually use 0 or 1 to label the answers. And for data analysts, it's easy to do the analysis, 0, 1 questions, okay? The second type, a rating or Likert scale. So that it is easy to answer and also to analyze because you quantify it. Response are less reliable over time. It's sometimes you provide an inconsistent answer to rating questions. So, and also it is susceptible to culture and style. In some culture, people avoid extreme ratings and avoid the ends of scales. Okay, so for example, several years ago, I did a survey like a coastal cities, in different countries. Okay, and it's very interesting. In Asian countries, people tend to avoid extreme answers or ratings. Let's say from a Likert scale, 1 to 10, you don't often see 1 or 10. It's like the actual range of the answers is somewhere between 2 to 8 or 2 to 9, actually. Yeah, so that will skew the answers when you compare to the responses that you gathered, let's say in America. People would give you extreme answers. It's like either 1 or 10. Okay, so when you compare those results, it's very different. So you would you need to understand the culture difference and so scale points, as I said, it's different between meaningful levels, and you want to avoid ambiguity between scale points, like a 5-point, 7-point, 10-point scale. Let's say if you do 2 surveys, and for the same question, one organization will say, like a 5-point scale, how would you rate that? And the other organization provide the response category like as a 7-point Likert scale. Even that the question wording is the same, you cannot compare. You know, it's not apple to apple, okay? Because, as I said, the rating, it's not consistent. Again, it's just the psychology behind that. And also, label scale points is very important. Everyone has a different way to label those, let's say 5-point scale, you know. So from less likely to very likely, you know. So usually we just label the point scales, like 1 and 10 or 1 and 7, the ends of the scale. What does that mean? And leave the room for the respondent to interpret those scales, okay? And the equal spacing of the scale is important, although in practice, I mean, the human psychology, they may leaning toward one end of the spectrum. The third one is a list of items, multiple choice, similar to dichotomous, only that you have more categories than 0, 1. Okay, also it's easy for data analysts to interpret and analyze the information. Although it might not be ordinary meaning that it has like specific orders. It might be a list of random items. Okay, so let's just say there are 3 possible policy initiatives. So you listed those. There's no order between those 3. Sometimes we randomize the order of the response category. Again, because respondents tend to say the first answer. It's the first response that is they read or they hear, they tend to provide that answer. Yes, I want this one. So we randomize the response category to avoid that. The 4th one is ranking and the ordinals. So it's easier to do when the survey is self-administered. And it is reliable, but it takes more time for respondents to compare all different items and rank them. This is the 1st one, 2nd one, 3rd one. So actually, if you're on the phone, it's really difficult for respondents to rank more than 3 items. It's really difficult. But if it is a web-based survey or mail-in survey, the respondent can take more time to compare across those items and rank them. Again, it is reliable, only that it takes more time to provide an answer for the respondent. So, but I would say from the data analyst perspective, it's more complicated to analyze the ranking question. Okay. So the last one was skip logic and the contingency questions. So it's like a conditioned on the answer you provided for the first question, whether you are eligible to answer the second and the following questions. Okay, so you can do the skip logic, and you need to be very careful with the skip logic. You need to do pretest to make sure that's the logic that you want to go, the sequence of the questions. Okay. But for data analysts, you also need to pay attention to the answers that you collected through the contingency questions, because the sample size for those questions will be different, especially when you provide a percentage reporting. You want to make sure you understand what the sample is. What's the base, what's the denominator is. Excuse me. Open-ended questions. As open-ended question, when you cannot be certain of the universe of possible answers, you ask an open-ended question. So what do I mean? Like universe of possible answers. So again, I'll use this example. What would you say is the biggest problem facing people in the Houston area today? Do I know the universe of possible answers? No, I don't. So we collect we call the verbatim, like record what the respondents say, their answers, and then code the question afterwards. It could be, if we 1,000 people, they may provide 1,000 different answers. So we try to read through all the answers. That takes most of my time. Read through all the answers and I try to move them into specific categories or themes or topics. Because, for example, this year is the 39th year of the survey. I have a general idea what the universe of the possible questions look like. So in the past years, we come up with some categories already. However, when you administer the survey, you don't provide those categories to your respondents. On my category response sheet, that's about 40 categories. Yeah, so the pros, respondents to open-ended questions are often more valid and reliable. You give them the freedom to provide the answer in whatever way or format they want. They will review as much information as they can. They could be very specific. The cons that takes more time to record the answers and also code the responses. So we try to avoid open-ended questions unless it's necessary, unless it's valuable for you, unless you don't know, the universe of the possible answers to those questions. Okay. So the semi-closed-ended questions, it is a combination of open-ended and closed-ended. Sometimes we could say, we could provide all the items that you know. For example, what's the how you get information, local news. So that like social media, radio, TV, and usually we provide another response category called other, specify. So you give the respondent a chance, an opportunity to provide an answer different from what you have already shared on the response on the list. Okay, so now is the breakout session. So think about the 3 questions you put together about voting. Your likelihood of voting in November election. You write a response options for each of those 3 questions, and then discuss the pros and the cons of your current design. And after the discussion, do you want to change the wording of the question or maybe the response options? So Jessica, would you do the breakout room?
Yes, I'll put us in breakout rooms. I just wanted to lift up one question that came through the chat since you just talked about it. And you really highlighted about, the randomization of response rates. But the question was, is moving the most likely response to the top, is that leading the results?
Yes, correct. So that is the reason why we try to randomize it. So when we do the computer assistant, the CAD telephone interviews, we have a way to randomize those options. When you do web-based survey, there's an option to say, let's randomize response categories. So for each participant, the order of the response options are different.
Okay, thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so I'm going to put us in breakout rooms. So, please feel free to, talk about in the breakout room, write your response options for each question, the pros and cons, and then do you have any questions how would you change if you, and maybe feedback from the others. So I'm going to magically open the breakout rooms, and like Harry Potter style, you all should be swept away into the breakout rooms, and we'll see you when we come back to the main session.
There's Jessica.
So checking in with you guys, we've got about 10 minutes. I see some of my friends from United Way in here, Doris and Rashid, and not to put you guys on the spot, but if you want to, if anybody wants to go ahead and share their, what were the 3 questions they put about somebody interested in voter registration. Oh, I also see Diana Turner in here as well. So if they can maybe help kind of just lead that conversation, talk about pros and cons. So anyone that would like to jump in first.
I mean, I can get us started. I put my questions in the text box before Jay went into all the do's and don'ts, but I had put kind of 3 questions that I thought built on each other. So I asked if the person knew who they were voting for in the upcoming election, if they were planning to vote in person or by mail, and what barriers could prevent them from voting. I felt like it would help to determine, one, if the person already had kind of an investment in a certain candidate, they're probably more likely to vote. If they knew how they were going to vote, they were probably more likely to vote because they have a plan. And then hearing what barriers, I thought that might help to gauge, get a better feel for like if there's something day of that might stop them, like if they say transportation's a barrier and they're gonna go in person. But I'm really interested, like I said, I picked those 3 because I thought they built on each other, but I'm really interested to see what others came up with.
Well, I had a similar question on the barriers. So my number 2 was, have you experienced obstacles to keep you from voting? So, and the other one is, I gave more of a Likert scale. How likely are you to vote in November? 1, not likely, 2, not sure, or 3, highly likely.
That's Kevin Kirk.
Yeah, you have to play with how you want them to try to answer that.
Yeah.
I think there might be somebody who needs to mute themselves. I feel like I'm hearing a separate conversation going on in the background. I think it's the woman whose last name is Platt. I don't know if you can hear us, but if you could mute yourself. Hi, Jessica.
Hey guys, just checking in, seeing how I heard some talking about response rates. So love to hear, what y'all are talking about. Just kind of peeking in.
I think we right now we're talking about just the open-ended nature of questions, because there were some good questions out there, but it's like when they're open-ended, how do we kind of meet that challenge?
Mm-hmm.
I think I intended mine to be yes or no, not that I put that in the chat, but mine was, are you registered? Do you intend to vote? And do you know where to find like resources on or information on how to cast your ballot, right? So just kind of getting to the intention and plan for knowledge to actually, be able to do the vote, to actually be able to vote, as opposed to kind of a open-ended, yeah, I'll vote, but I have no plan or information on how to make that possible.
Yeah, I know that was my first question was, how old are you? Like, what is your age, right? Like, I mean, just, are you 18, right? Like, so starting with that, because, maybe that then wouldn't be, they're not eligible to vote. So I kind of took that standpoint. But I like where you're going with like having an open-ended too. Like, so for me, it's that time, like open-ended can just be so many different options. And I love qualitative analysis. Like I love theming and coding stuff, but it takes time. So just trying to balance that with some, close-ended and open-ended, that's, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. The open-ended questions are good if you have the time to invest in those answers. But if you're looking to accomplish something and I think the yes or no or agree or disagree, gets you to the point quicker. Maybe in a small focus group or something, you could do the open-ended questions. But if you were going to do like a mass survey, I would definitely go with the yes or no or agree or disagree. Just to quick answer.
Right. So if this is like October 10th versus August, right? So October 10th may mean that you definitely have to go with close-ended questions.
Yeah.
Early voting is about to start. Well, I don't know when early voting starts, but I know it's October something. Versus, June, where you may have time to code open-ended questions.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I think that the open-ended questions would be, we wanted to know like who are they planning to vote for? But in this case, I believe that the question is how likely is that the person is going to vote or not? So I went like with Lucretia, pretty much like Lucretia. I asked, are you eligible to vote? Are you registered to vote? And will you vote? And that's all I asked. So I didn't know if that was maybe too direct, and maybe I would get just a little piece of information. It's just if they're going to vote or not. I didn't ask like for barriers or anything like that. So maybe I lacked that. But it was, if I wanted to know if they're going to vote, I just tried to went very direct to the question.
well, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the gentleman who spoke about kind of just the idea of how have you voted in the past 4 previous elections, just kind of that idea of their commitment to the process. And that might, you know, come into play and help us determine if they're likely to do it this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had some questions. Yeah.
I also wondered about asking if they have a preference who wins, which is kind of maybe a controversial question. I don't know if you've asked that or not, but it could indicate, you know, if they come up with a really passionate response, it could indicate their commitment to voting.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add, it is starting, and I like the thought process behind really look at your timetable as opposed to August to October, but also what kind of time do you have to devote to this? When are you putting it out, and when do you need these results tabulated by? So whether you're going open-ended or yes or no, just the whole combination of really keeping your timetables in mind. That is an area that I struggle with sometimes. So to have that point brought home, I felt was a good point.
Darby, you sound like you're underwater. I could understand anything you said. I'm sorry.
I think I made out a little. I think she was talking about like the time frame, like what's your time you're looking at, like from August to October, and kind of factoring that in.
Okay.
I think that was what I picked up from the underwater message, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
But it's okay. Yeah, she's having internet issues. But you can put it in
Okay.
the chat if you'd like, and then we can share it aloud as well. So we have about 2 minutes left in the breakout room. I just broadcasted the message. Yeah.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is when she mentioned what's your intention, like what are you really trying to get at, like intention to vote. But you know, I think one of the things that happens in presidential elections is that you get a lot more voters, but they only do like the top of the ballot as opposed to the bottom, so they don't vote in local elections as much. So they, you know, take care of the top of the ballot. So if your intention is to focus more on local elections, then you may have to change all of these questions just in general, without even thinking about like who are you voting for. Is, you know, how do you focus on, you know, kind of getting a full picture of the voting piece, because I know that happens a lot.
I have some thoughts. I think, you know, like my perception of this question is that you'd be asking these 3 questions because you're trying to get at a research question or, you know, an overarching goal about what you're trying to figure out. So whether it's, you know, within the confines of creating a survey for an agency or a study, what is the overarching goal? So do you want to know, are people going to vote or they're not going to vote? Is that the goal? Or is it, do you want to know what's keeping people from voting? And so, I mean, I think that becomes a really important part of what makes a good question, is really being able to break down that question and get at what information is going to be useful for your purposes. What do you need to use this information for? So, so when I was thinking about questions, it said something about are people going to vote? So I wanted to know, are you registered to vote? Do you plan on voting? And then what obstacles are do you anticipate experiencing when voting? Like, you know, with COVID, you know, we don't know, like we've seen in other states that they've had in person, but they have a lot less places to go vote. So do you have to now get on public transportation and go across the city to get to vote, and you have to work, and is that going to be something, are you going to be able to mail in? So I think that's kind of what I was thinking, but I appreciate all your guys' thoughts as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Irene. Motivation's a good kind of ending note since we're gonna be slipped back into the main room. So this is a great discussion. I'm glad I, joined into y'all's room. Okay, it looks like we're all back from the breakout sessions, Jay. Oh, but you're on mute. Oh no.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now off on mute. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, I think everyone did great with the exercise. Since I have more slides, more information to share with you all, I'll just go through those slides quickly with everyone. I know how to avoid the questionnaire problems, so pre-test is very important. It can help you to identify questions that causing confusion, and also, the wording and the grammar issues. Those are like small issues compared to other potential biases and leading questions. So typos and the broken skip logic is critical. I've seen surveys that was designed and programmed in Quadric that they didn't use the skip logic correctly until we got the data. It's too late, so it's a huge issue. So always pre-test the skip logic functions to make sure it's worked as it's supposed to be, okay? So for example, I can share with you that when we do the Kinder Houston area survey, every year the questionnaire is a little bit different. Sometimes we introduce new questions, and that's the reason why we do pre-test before launching the survey. We listen to the live interviews, especially paying attention to folks who ask to clarify things, with the questions, things that they don't understand, or they also want to ask, do you mean this or do you mean that? If that's the case, we try to modify the wording to make it as clearer as possible. Question wording. Avoid the double-barreled questions. So here's an example. How well do you get along with your supervisors and your co-workers? That example is like, when I provide an answer, what should I do? Are you talking about my relationship with your supervisors or co-workers? That's a double-barreled question. Okay, if I ask you after this workshop, is this workshop informative and interactive? That's double-barreled question. Avoid it. The next one, which happened pretty common, is leading questions. What does leading question mean? Let's just say when you go to Starbucks and order coffee, and I want a latte. Instead of asking what size do you want, the attendant will ask, do you want a grande? That's a leading question, because people tend to say yes, rather than think through all the options and give you the answer. Okay, that's a leading question. Do you want to add a warranty to your car? Instead of asking that question, they ask, should I sign you up for 3-year or 5-year warranty? That's a leading question. Okay. The next one, avoid the negatives. and the double negative questions, because it takes more time for the respondent to process the information. So instead of saying, I don't know this statement, I don't know about this program, is it a true or false? You could just ask, how well do you know about this program? And you can provide a Likert scale for the respondent to answer this question. So you can gather more information rather than say, I don't know about this program, is it true or false? Correct? So also another thing I didn't put it here, you try to phrase it in using neutral words, no emotional charged words. Just be as neutral as you can, because you cannot presume how respondent, their attitudes toward a certain topics. So try to use neutral words. Okay. So simple words and the sentences that are easy to understand again, and also clear definition, no jargon, especially this is when I work with researchers. They tend to use terms that the general public don't understand. So we try to use plain language as much as we can, and also be very specific. The question order, I also mentioned it earlier, put the easy questions at the beginning and also specific questions at the beginning. And also ask open-ended questions early, because it takes more time for them to retrieve the information from the memory. For example, that question about biggest problem, it's usually the first or second question when we do the historical survey. Okay. Ask sensitive questions toward the end. That's why some of the demographic information or religious belief information, we ask those sensitive questions toward the end, because you don't want them to shut them down at the very beginning. If you ask a very sensitive question at the beginning, think about their emotion. I don't want to review my religious belief with you. There's nothing to do with you. And then it's a whole attitude and the motivation for this respondent. So try to ask those sensitive questions toward the end. And the group questions by topic versus the randomized order. There's no right or wrong for this one, because it serves a purpose. Let's say, if you are administering a specific survey, you try to group questions by topics so that it saves the respondent time to retrieve that part of the information, because they are all related. So once you were thinking about all the activities you were doing last night, they're all related. Okay, so you try to group those together, but also sometimes for researchers, they want to randomize the order just to test the reliability of your answers. Sometimes we ask similar questions at the beginning and at the end of the survey, just to check the reliability of the answers. Okay, if you have the liberty to do that, because it takes time. Criteria, again, reliability is very important, and also validity, whether the survey instrument to measure what you intend to measure, and using existing questions versus creating a new questions. Okay, so when you want to create a questionnaire, I would suggest you go to some existing question banks. It's like a question database, to do some research, to see how others ask this question, how they approach this topic. Use an established question with known reliability and also validity, and also the known universe of response categories, rather than recreating the wheel. But also check if this is the right question for you, for your population. So if there's a context, when you get the wording of that question from a specific survey project, you need to understand who's their audience, who's the target population for that survey, whether it's applicable for your survey, okay? And also like some historic context. We had a question in the survey, said a book that most people disapprove of should be kept out of the public library. Why I ask this question? This is a typical question about the civil liberty. And so at a different era, when you ask this question, you get a different interpretation and also different answers. So if you find a question, it's a close fit, just use the existing question. If no existing questions, just create a one specifically for your purpose. So I want to introduce, I would just want you to get familiar with some of the resources. Provide a link to the Kinder Houston area survey. We have a lot of questions in the past. 39 years. If my memory is correct, we have about 700 questions. Each year, we ask about 100 questions. Also, not everyone answers those 100 questions as a contingency questions. But there are a lot of questions you may use for different surveys. General social surveys has a lot of questions. So since they have it since 1972. And Census Bureau questionnaire archive, they have a group of survey researchers to test all different kinds of questions. So that's really a good archive for different purposes. They have business surveys, they have, let's say, the pulse survey that they administered recently for COVID-19. Especially they have the financial resources to conduct those surveys. So the quality of the data is ensured. Pew Research Center and the CDCs for health-related questions and attitudes toward healthcare, Kaiser Family Foundations, and for education-related, always go to National Household Education Surveys. They have the best question design. The Roper IPO archive, I don't know if all of you have the access to that, but for most of the universities, they have access to that database. Religious data archives, it's a special topic, and it's sensitive. Those questions are sensitive, so for that one, you go specifically to Religious Data Archive at the ARDA. They have the best questions about religion, religious belief. And the RAND American Life Panel Study, that's a special project. It asks all types of questions about the quality of life and your experience, because they follow the same cohort throughout the years. So if you're thinking about doing a survey like that, that's the best example. Okay, I'll go quickly. Jessica, I think I have about 12 minutes. I'll go very quickly with the sampling design, just to get you familiar with those terms. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Let's see. Sample size. First of all, it's not like serving more people. It's costly. It may not be as cost efficient, so you always try to figure out what's the best sample size for your survey. determine the number of participants you want for this survey as like a target number. So I share with you a formula. I'm going to share with you the slides. You can do the exercise later on, but just to give you an example, let's just say the margin of error is 95% level of confidence that we usually do. Let's look at this. If you increase the survey sample size from 50 to 100, you reduce the margin of error by 4 percentage points, right? And just let's look at if you move it from 100 to 200, you improve it by 3 percentage points. Let's look at the differences between 1,000 versus 2,000. It only gives you the advantage to reduce the margin of error by 1 percentage points. You know, so just looking at a table like this, I mean, you know, each case is different, but it can help you to make a decision what the number of participants you want to have for this survey based on time. Do you have time to reach out to all the potential participants and secure the sample size? Okay, time, true, money. Do you have the financial resources to do that? You know, for a typical telephone survey, you have to random telephone survey. You have to call more households to reach a larger sample size. Okay, so time and money have a constraints here. So here is an example I want to share with this group. This is a letter I received from this group. They administer a parent student, and they made an error at the first one, which is, you know, they have very short-term time to turn around. You know, they only have 1 week to collect the information. However, they had an error in the survey. They didn't limit the number of times for the parent to complete the survey. So how did they find out? You know, after the first batch of data come in, if they look at it, it was like, whoa, the data is skewed, you know, and it's just invalidated the current results, you know. So what they have to do, they have to redo the whole thing. So just, again, it's an example. The pretest is very important. For this time, it's not necessarily the wording of the question, but rather how they design the sampling is the issue. I'll skip this. There's different types of interviews. You could do telephone interviews or personal interviews. Mixed mode, you could do telephone interview only, or you can do a mixed mode with both, you know, traditional mail-in survey and a web version versus per paper only, or different kind of a combination. For nonprofits who just want to gather information from your clients, you know, a mixed mode, it's okay. You don't need to worry about waiting or any data issues afterwards when you do the data analysis. But for researchers, we have to compare because the data collected through different modes. There might have some issues when you compare those results. So we'll do some sampling. We'll do some statistical weighting to make sure that those answers are comparable. But for a typical survey for a nonprofit, you don't need to worry too much about the modes if you try to reach as many participants as possible. And the increased response rate is very important. So sometimes it requires multiple contact with the potential respondents. Gosh, I have too many information to share. about the sampling methods. And I'm not sure about this group, how familiar you are with those concepts. For sampling methods, there are probability sampling and non-probability sampling. So it depends on the purpose of your survey, whether you want to reach out to all the clients that you have or a specific subpopulation. For researchers, so we usually prefer probability sampling to statistical reliability. But sometimes it is okay to do non-probability sampling. What I've seen on the nonprofits, they sometimes do convenience sampling, which means like an interceptor survey. When folks show up at a specific event, you ask them to fill out a form. That's an interceptor survey. This is just to gather some basic information, okay? And the snowball sampling, especially when you do that to try to reach hard to reach population, So for example, for homeless people, homeless youth, okay? There's no good way to reach out to homeless youth unless when you get one, go through, talk to them and ask them to refer to a friend who they know that's also a homeless youth. So that's called a snowball sampling. We usually use that method for qualitative research. So this is just a general idea of what the sampling method. So we usually consider, and there's a pros and a cons for different sampling methods. For non-probability sampling, it's less costly, but it does not support any statistical inference. So do not make any statement other than you just gather the information from this particular group. Sample size is really important when you report the survey data. People want to know exactly what's the response rate, how many people participated in this survey. Okay, that help folks understand the power of a statistical inference, and whether you can generalize this, the findings, or it's specifically for the population that you have. And there are a lot of bias in the survey design. Frame coverage bias. For example, if I do telephone survey, I can only reach folks who has a telephone. If I only reach people with a landline, there's a coverage bias. So now we reach people through both cell phone and landline, okay, to minimize the coverage bias. And selection bias, that means like, because when you contact someone, it's up to the respondent to say, yes, I'm going to conduct this survey, complete the form or not. So it's a self-selection. And in general, women are more likely to respond to surveys. And old people are more likely to respond to surveys. It is always hard to reach 18 to 45 years old male respondents, okay? And the size bias and the non-response bias, So these are the things sometimes if you do probability sampling, that can be corrected through different statistical methods. But if it is a non-probability sampling, when you report the findings, you may want to say like a caveat, so we understand there's a coverage bias in this. So for example, recently I got a data from a commercial bank. They get all the information about their clients, their credit consumption information, transaction information. So that's a coverage bias because you don't have that many low-income family or folks in this data set. When you do the read the findings, always keep in mind about the coverage bias. You don't want to, if you are talking about a low-income people, you are only talking about a low-income people who has a credit card with that specific bank. Okay, so lastly, with 1 minute, just to talk about the incentives of consent and the confidentiality. So each one with 1 sentence. Incentives. Sometimes it's good to provide incentives, but not always. Okay, because about the selection bias. You know, so it depends. It depends. And when you provide incentives, typically there's not much difference between, let's say, $25 versus $40. Okay, so depending on how long the survey is, I don't want to generalize it. It's really very specific. For example, if you are doing a in-person survey for 1 hour, that really takes a lot of time. You know, so you probably want to increase the incentives. And if you have a very good relationship with the target population, I mean, even no incentive is okay. You know, people just if they understand the importance of the survey, they're going to participate. Consent, always ask consent, complete a consent form. Whether it is a verbal consent or whether, you know, it's a web-based, just 1 sentence, you know, whether you agree to participate, that's important. Confidentiality, you want to make sure the participants understand how you're going to use the data, store the data, just for confidentiality concerns, you know. Okay, so the last one, if you are not going to administer the survey yourself, here are some criteria that you want to go through when you select a survey vendor. Cost, okay, and the service, what kind of survey, particular service that they provide, and also how long they're going to, you know, the training access, the training process, how long they are going to train their survey interviewers. The interviews, it's very important. It's a data quality issue. And then ask them for some past projects. If you can talk to the PI, the principal investigators of past projects, it will be helpful for you to select the right survey vendor for your project. Okay. I think that's it. And here's my contact information. If you have any questions, just feel free to contact us at htbc@rice.edu. HTBC means Houston Community Data Connections. We provide neighborhood level information for nonprofits and government agencies and all community leaders for free. You know, so there's an online dashboard that you could collect information about your specific community or neighborhood. But I would say we have more information than what you can see from the website. So always, you know, send a request. If there's anything we could provide for free, we'll send it your way. And also, if you have some general questions about survey design, about research design, we're happy to provide any assistance. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I ran over for 2 minutes.
Okay, Jay, thank you so much. I think this was really informative and full of rich content. And there's a lot of questions that kind of came through the chat. And so maybe I'll circle back to you for one of them, since, you know, if anybody has to leave, please make sure you do the survey for your feedback. You know, would love to have that. And then I'll share that screen now while you answer that question. So there's one question I did want to ask real quick. So have you noticed any trends or changes in survey design as a result of the pandemic?
As a result of the pandemic, that's a good question. Definitely door-to-door surveys, you know, it's really difficult, especially for Census 2020. Now they don't have, you know, they reduced for 1 week the door-to-door survey period. And the 40% of the population that hasn't completed the census, which is a big problem. So that's sad. And also in general, reaching folks through telephone become more difficult. You know, the response rate has been decreasing in the past decade. You know, so we've seen response rate like 70%, 60%-ish, reduced to 30%-ish, reduced to 20%. And for some of the national polling, I could share with you, sometimes it's just a 9 to 11%. You know, so very low response rate. But for surveys like those administered by the school district, by the national government agencies, we can still reach to 70% plus response rate, which is good, Okay, yeah, so Jessica, if you can share those questions with me, I'll be happy to answer those through emails so you can share with the group. I apologize, I run over. We reserved the 15 minutes for Q&A and didn't have that much time.
It's okay. That was such great content though, and I think, I'll definitely share some questions that are still kind of coming in with you and circle back to you for that. But what you said about response rate, I think we're seeing that firsthand as well, that just being gentle to yourself about your response rate. What your response rate was pre-COVID might not be now that we're in COVID and everything that's going on. So I think that what you're saying about on the national level for some of the polling and the census especially, we have to take that back into our nonprofits and the work we're doing to be, and I think a lot more effort has to go into getting some of the survey collection, follow-up calls or follow-up emails, or, really trying to get the information that we're needing to improve our work. So Jay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know we ran over, but that happens sometimes. And so I think everybody's, appreciate that. I have the survey link. Would love everybody's feedback. And hey, give me feedback on my survey. Hopefully my questions were, followed through with the way Jay gave her points today. I think they do, but we'll see. I might go back and look at that. So thank you so much. And I will stop the recording now and just thank you all so much for being here. And we'll see you all again on September 3rd for Alice in our community here at the Coffee and Quality session.